sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a dim orange glow across the sprawling highways of North Carolina. In the shadows of a quiet town, the unmistakable roar of motorcycle engines echoed through the still air. The rumbling sound belonged to a pack of bikers, a notorious gang known as the Black Horns. They were a tight-knit group of rebels who thrived on chaos, their presence a symbol of power and defiance. They weren't the kind to follow rules, and they sure didn't mind breaking a few bones to get what they wanted. At the heart of the gang, leading the pack with a grin that could send shivers down anyone's spine, was Razor, the gang's president. His leather vest, patched with symbols of his victories, screamed of years spent in the wild. Razor had built the Black Horns from the ground up, earning respect and fear alike. No one messed with them until tonight. As Razor and his gang sped through the highway, they caught sight of a military truck parked at a roadside diner, its engine humming softly. The paint on the truck was still fresh, a dark military green that screamed authority. The lights of the diner flickered above the truck, casting a soft glow over the area. The bikers could sense something was off, but they were too far gone into their reckless momentum to think much about it. Razor slowed his bike, grinning. "What do we have here? A soldier? A lone wolf?" His second-in-command, Shade, nodded. "Let's have some fun." The gang skidded to a halt, parking their bikes in front of the diner. Razor's leather jacket brushed the seat as he swung off his bike, the rest of the crew following suit. The door to the diner chimed as they entered, the air thick with the smell of greasy food and stale coffee. The few patrons inside the diner shot them nervous glances, but no one dared to speak up. It was clear that Razor and his gang were the kind of men who could turn a peaceful place into a battlefield with just a look. But they weren't prepared for the man sitting alone at the corner booth. His name was Sergeant Mark Daniels, a soldier with the Tactical Support Unit, TSU. Mark wasn't just any soldier. He had served in some of the most dangerous theaters of war, operating in covert missions where success was the only option. He had seen everything: insurgents, bombings, close-quarter combat, and survival tactics that would make most men's blood run cold. But Mark wasn't here for a mission. He was here for peace, a quiet meal after a long deployment. The bikers, used to intimidating anyone who crossed their path, didn't expect the air to shift when they walked in. Mark didn't flinch as Razor approached him. He didn't even look up, his hands steady as they wrapped around the coffee mug. The world outside seemed to still. Razor felt an unfamiliar twinge in his gut. He'd seen many men in his life, but this one was different. "You're in our spot, soldier," Razor said, his voice smooth but carrying the threat of violence beneath. Mark finally looked up, his piercing eyes locked onto Razor's. He didn't say a word. His gaze alone was enough to make the bikers hesitate, and that hesitation was a rare sight. Razor chuckled, trying to brush off the moment. "What's the matter? Lost your nerve?" Mark didn't reply immediately. He simply took a sip from his mug, letting the silence drag on. The air between them thickened, a standoff unfolding in the dim light. Then Mark's lips parted, and when he spoke, his voice was calm. Controlled. "I don't want trouble. But if it comes to me, you'll regret it," Mark said, his words sharp and direct, like a threat disguised as a warning. Razor's grin faltered for a moment. This wasn't how it usually went. He was used to having men cower, or at least talk back with empty bravado. This soldier wasn't intimidated. He wasn't backing down. Shade leaned in, cracking his knuckles. "You think you can take us all on, soldier?" Mark's eyes didn't waver. "I don't need to take all of you on. Just one." He set the coffee cup down with a deliberate click, his body language shifting as if he were preparing for something more than a mere conversation. Before anyone could react, Mark moved. The chair creaked under his sudden movement, and in a flash, his hand shot out to grab the nearest object, a salt shaker, and launched it with pinpoint precision straight at Shade's face. The small object struck Shade hard in the eye, stunning him momentarily. Razor barked an order, but Mark was already on the move. In a blur of motion, Mark slid out of the booth, twisting his body like a trained fighter. He used the force of his movements to create space, positioning himself between the bikers and the door. Razor, momentarily stunned, signaled to his crew to circle in. But the moment they did, Mark was already anticipating their moves. He ducked under a swing from one of the bikers and countered with a brutal knee to his gut, sending the man stumbling backward. Razor stepped forward, thinking he could overpower the soldier with sheer size, but Mark was faster. He darted behind the biker and twisted his arm into a hold that put the man on the ground in a split second. "Get him!" Razor shouted, now visibly frustrated. The rest of the gang lunged at Mark, but the soldier moved like lightning. His hands were everywhere, striking, dodging, disarming. It wasn't just brute force, it was the deadly efficiency of someone trained to neutralize threats swiftly and decisively. The bikers were a formidable force when united, but they weren't trained for combat like Mark. The gang tried to regroup, but it was clear they were out of their depth. Razor, now furious, charged at Mark with a metal chain in hand, swinging it wildly. Mark dodged the swing, and in one fluid motion, he disarmed Razor, using the chain to trip him. Razor hit the ground hard, unable to process what had just happened. "Stand down," Mark said, his voice calm but firm as he surveyed the downed bikers. "This doesn't have to get worse." The room was silent, save for the sound of heavy breathing from the bikers. One by one, the gang members struggled to stand, their pride shattered, but their bodies too beaten to continue. Shade, still nursing the blow to his eye, glared at Mark, but said nothing. Razor lay on the floor, glaring up at the soldier who had just dismantled his crew. Mark stood over him, looking down with a mix of pity and warning. "Next time, you pick on someone who doesn't know what they're doing." He turned to walk out of the diner, not bothering to look back. The bikers were broken, their confidence shattered, and their reputation in tatters. Razor, unable to move or stand with any dignity, could only mutter in disbelief. As Mark exited the diner, he didn't need to look over his shoulder. He knew the Black Horns wouldn't come after him again. Sometimes the biggest battle wasn't about who could fight the longest, but who could make the enemy realize they were out of their league before the fight even began. And Mark, with his calm resolve and deadly skills, had made it clear that the Black Horns had messed with the wrong